So there are some people for whom you cannot stop them. Like when they get into your team, they immediately set themselves apart and they just start chewing up anything that you can throw at them. So for those folks, I feed them. You feed the machine and the machine runs.
Welcome back to Tech Teams Today, the show where we dive deep with engineering leaders building the future. I'm your host, Lucas Mendes, founder and CEO of Revelo. And if you haven't already, please make sure to follow or subscribe to Tech Teams Today on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's guest is Robert Gonzalez, VP of Engineering at SugarCRM. Welcome, Robert.
Lucas, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the show. Robert leads a global engineering org of over 50 people across front end, back end, platform, mobile, security, and performance. They're shipping products that generate over $100 million in annual revenue. He's a hands on technical leader. He's a mentor and a culture builder with a people first approach to scaling product innovation. Robert, we like to start by having our guests sort of walk us through their career, their professional background. How did your career in tech begin? And what path led you to becoming a VP of engineering?
That's a good question. So I share this every now and again with folks who show an interest in this. So we got to go back a little over 20 years ago to how I got into tech. It started actually in the mid 90s. My interest was piqued in this thing called HTML at the time. And I had somebody that I had known at the time had lost his job, and he had taken a sort of a intermediate gig as a web page builder. I know that sounds kind of funny in modern parlance, but what he was doing is he was writing HTML from scratch. And I went over to his house one day and I was looking over his shoulder and I saw him writing code and futzing around on the local browser. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm building a web page." I'm like, okay. So I got curious about it. I asked him, what he was doing it in, and he mentioned HTML. So I went and I did a little bit of research. If you can imagine, search engines back then in the mid 90s weren't what they are today. It took a little time to find that out. But at the same time, he handed me a magazine, and of all things, magazine had snippets of code in it, had some JavaScript, had some CSS at the time, and so I started dabbling in the mid 90s. Towards the end of the 90s, I was working as a specialist at an automotive plant in the Bay Area. In fact, where the Tesla plant is now in Fremont, California. And part of the job I had there required a lot of information management. And if you can imagine, a process coming from the old days of General Motors was very paper driven. I tell people I had binders on my desk of paper, and I was not really into dealing with paper that much, and so I wanted to figure out a way to digitize some of that stuff. And so I started using computers, and at the same time, I started realizing there's some things I can do here on a network that would be kind of cool. So I taught myself a little bit about how networks work. Then I started wanting to actually have some interactive stuff, and so I started to teach myself programming. My first programming language was Perl, and I worked in Perl with some flat file systems as a sort of a data backend until I realized I wanted some relationships between data. And I did some research, and the first thing that I found was you need a relational database management system. And the first thing I found for that was MySQL at the time. And I started dabbling in MySQL. And as soon as I did that, the first thing that came up with it was, of course, PHP, because that was all the rage back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I started teaching myself how to program on all things PHP. A few years into that, I spent a lot of time on some forums and in various communities looking for help, and at the same time looking to help. And what I found was in an open source community like the PHP and MySQL communities, there's a lot of help. If you ask, there's help. And it comes from all over the world in a lot of different ways. And what ended up happening is I started getting really good, really fast at the things that I was doing. And I managed to parlay that into a career change. In the mid 2000s, around 2006, I think it was, 2006, I took my first gig as a web developer, spent a couple of years doing that, moved onto another gig as a senior platform engineer working for a real estate marketing company, did a couple of side gigs and personal gigs very close to that time, and then ended up at SugarCRM, where I'm currently employed now. I started my career at Sugar as a senior engineer on the platform. I learned a lot of different parts of the product and the various stacks or elements of the stacks and the applications that drove it, and went from being a back-end engineer to sort of a full stack engineer to being a team lead to being a manager, and then very quickly went from manager, senior manager, director, senior director to VP as I started to take on more and started to move more into leadership and strategy from what originally started out as a sort of a tactical platform position. So that's how I got to where I am today. I know it was a lot of words, but that's my path to VP.
All right. I love talking to a fellow HTML builder from the mid 90s. Yeah. who also dabbled in LAMP. Yeah. But today, Robert, you lead a very large global team and they have multiple engineering specialties. And I'd love to hear what's been your biggest lesson about scaling leadership across time zones and disciplines. Like you have to be a leader to people who are definitely very different, work in different geographies, and have different job scopes. How do you become that leader?
So, an important part of the role of any leader, I think, is to understand the various personas that work within your organization. Right? There's anytime you start crossing boundaries outside of your own locale, whether it's your own city, state, or even country, there's a part of that growth that has to incorporate language differences, cultural differences, geopolitical differences, all kinds of things that happen. That's just at the basics, right? You also have time zones that becomes an issue if you're dealing with people. For example, if I'm in the United States and I'm on the West Coast, so if I'm working with people even in the UK, I'm behind them by about 8 hours. If I'm working with people that are in Eastern Europe, in areas like Romania or Poland, I could be behind that time zone by as many as 10 or 11 hours. You start going further, like Pakistan and whatnot, you start to become, 12, 13, 14 hours. So you start to learn how to manage culture and manage persona, manage time a little differently. At the same time, you still have to unify around a language and a communication platform. Fortunately, in technology, a lot of the terms are the same anywhere you go in the world. And so then it becomes just a matter of how do we communicate? How do I simplify language? How do I simplify communication to be able to talk to people in tech, but across all the different variants of our communication styles and our lifestyles? So when it comes to scaling up, one of the things that I've had to really adapt to more than anything is the time zone difference, because my business is all over the world. I've had folks on the East Coast of the United States. That's a 3 hour time difference, not huge in today's time economy, if you will. I have colleagues right now that are in the UK. I have colleagues that are in Romania and Poland. I've had staff that was in Pakistan before. And I think the hardest thing there was, how do we find a time to be able to communicate and talk? And then how do we sort of decouple things from a calendar or a clock? Because there are things that we can do that don't require us to be face to face. So can I Slack message you and say, hey, this isn't important. Can you get back to me in a little bit? And maybe you can wait until their next day, kind of a thing. And then while you're moving into those areas, being able to build out teams in those areas so that way you have collaboration at scale. That's another thing that works really well, because I can tell you right now that my US team is much smaller than my international team, but I have pockets of team members all in all of my geos, so that way they can collaborate, they can work together, they can build, they can challenge each other at the same time in their areas. So there's still that pocket of continuity, that pocket of synergy that you have working for you throughout the world.
What sort of stuff did you get wrong on your way to becoming this leader of global distributed teams?
So there's a couple of things I can think of. One is, as a leader, one of the things that we are responsible for is delegation, right? We can't do all the things we want to do. We have to delegate. And one of the things that I've discovered is there comes a time for you to be able to delegate. And then there's times where if you do delegate, you have to be mindful of how you delegate and where you delegate to, right? Sometimes delegating to people that are 12 hours offset from you yields results that are not what you're after, right? If you and I can't ever talk, if my 11 in the morning is your 11 at night, it makes it very hard for me to delegate with continuity. So one of the things I had to learn was I can't delegate everything that I might want to certain places in the world or certain times, if I need like rapid response. Some things I can. There's some things that might not be as critical or as urgent, but things that need immediate attention or need rapid turnaround, I have to keep those a little bit closer to home. Another thing that I've learned along the way is not everybody prioritizes or communicates or treats things with the same level of urgency that I might where I sit. And I have to understand how people respond to tasks, to questions, and even to statements. There's things that sometimes you might ask a question. I've actually had this happen recently where I asked a question in a Slack channel, and the response that I got from my team was it felt almost fearful or anxious. And I could understand that afterwards when I look back on it, because the way that question came across might have sounded more like I was being accusatory rather than being inquisitive. And so I had to clarify with them, hey guys, what I'm really looking for is just a check-in, really, and if you can tell me where we are, so that way I know how to frame a conversation I'm having over here. So that's another thing that has been somewhat challenging that I've gotten wrong a few times in my global landscape.
And what's a hard call that you had to make recently and that made you feel really tested as a leader?
I'm actually I'm in that right now. Where
Okay.
I'm working, I'm actually leading. I'm leading a project right now. I'm leading it because the project team that I have in place, they're wildly distributed. I have somebody who's on the west coast of the United States, somebody who's on the east coast of the United States. I have two. Actually, I think I have one person in Belarus, one person in Poland, and one person in Craiova, Romania. So if you can imagine, I got five different people, and these are all senior people in my organization, people that I trust, people that I rely on, and people that absolutely know what they're doing and when to do it. The scope of this particular project, though, ballooned. And part of that I believe ballooned because we are all disparate, and I had not paid as close attention to that particular project as I think I needed to. And so there was a period of time where I started asking, just within the last month or so, I started asking some pretty basic questions that I couldn't get answers to. And I don't think it was for fault of the team as much as the attention that should have been paid to that project wasn't. That was on my shoulders. But what that yielded was I needed to get a lot more tied into that project. And so over the course of the last 4 weeks or so, I've managed to do that. But where this tested me was I had to take back control of something that I trust my folks to tend to. And it wasn't for failure of theirs. It was really because of my own failure. And so I had to go in and become much closer to the project than I might normally be, just to kind of get it back on track. I do have the full expectation that I'm going to be able to let go of the reins on this one again soon. But where this tested me was I had to look a manager in the face and say, I'm doing this. I had to look a senior leader in the face and say, hey, I'm doing this. And, I had to watch their expression as they saw a VP have to come in and do something that arguably a VP probably shouldn't have to do.
Yeah, and that's a challenging situation to be in. When along those lines, when we met in person, I remember that you still stay close to the team and you still stay close to the code that your team ships. And how my question is, how do you balance deep technical understanding with this executive leadership and the responsibilities that come with it?
So that's that can be a challenge at times. I like to view myself as sort of the guy that takes a complex situation and simplifies it for human consumption. And I don't mean to make it sound like engineers aren't human. What I mean by that is engineers, particularly seasoned engineers, your senior level, staff level engineers, they're very deep in tech and they know tech very well. I know tech very well. I've been deep in tech for a long time. And being able to translate technology to language that might be consumable by stakeholders, that might be consumable by customers, that can get hard. If you go and you ask a seasoned engineer, hey, what am I getting? What you're building a framework, awesome. You're building an architecture, awesome. What am I getting tangibly? What are you putting in my lap that I'm going to be able to use? A lot of engineers struggle to do that. That has been a challenge that I've had to overcome myself. How do I communicate with stakeholders? How do I communicate with customers? How do I communicate with users? How do I communicate with non-technical staff, the technical pieces of what I'm doing while still being technical? I mean, I still have my eyes in code. I still write code of my own every day. I don't write code for the product, so everybody can rest easy knowing I'm not building for the product anymore. But I still write a lot of my own tools. I dabble in new languages and things like that just to see what's available to me. But being able to take the technical and distill it down into human readable form, I think it's a challenge that I've solved, and it's a part of the job that I really enjoy, and it's a thing that challenges me every day still.
And even though you're not writing code for the product at Sugar CRM, you've worked across nearly every product in Sugar's portfolio: self serve, mobile, BPM, platform integrations. How do you keep innovation moving across so many teams without creating chaos or burnout? How do you juggle all these work streams?
I think if you were to ask some of my teams, they would say, "What do you mean without chaos and burnout?" So one of the overriding characteristics that I look for in anybody that I bring onto my team, whether it's a new hire or a transfer, anybody that I want to collaborate with, is curiosity. Curiosity is like my number one driving characteristic of any engineer that I would have in my organization, and that is something I think that helps me lead teams through diverse product development, diverse environments, diverse situations like that. Anytime you step into something new, there's a lot to learn, and if you're hungry to learn, if you want to learn something something, or you know that you don't know something, but you really want to go know that thing, there's nothing that can stop you from it, right? My teams have a tendency to live in that space of curiosity and drive. Like they drive for understanding, they drive for doing things well and knowing how to do a thing. So as part of any work that we do in any of the projects that I'm on or any of the parts of the business that I run, curiosity kind of leads the way. And that has been something that actually, as for a leader, that eases the burden on me because I don't have to be as on top of people to do things because they themselves are driven to do those things because they're naturally curious. My entire team is naturally curious, and that is a thing that I hope every leader of any group of people has in their people is a curiosity, an undying curiosity to learn more and do more.
I mentioned at the start that you're a mentor, and we spoke about this before. You've mentored junior engineers, you've built internship programs, and you've helped develop leaders. I think my question is, what do you look for in those young engineers, and what do you look for in raw talent, and how do you help them grow?
So I'll go right back to curiosity. That's my number one. In fact, I've had people that I've hired before who did not have traditional technology or engineering type backgrounds, but because they showed a handful of characteristics that I look for, curiosity is the first. Another is coachability. If a person knows that they don't know everything and they're willing to take leadership from somebody who might know something else, that is a huge driver for me. Like I can teach tech if you're willing to be teachable. I can teach tech if you're curious. What I can't teach is I can't teach you to how to want to go out and learn something, how to want to be curious, right? In technology, there's whole courses at colleges that teach you that stuff. If you want it, it's there. So for me, what I look for is I look for curiosity. I look for coachability. I look for drive. I look for people that are out playing with tech. Like I said, I dabble myself. I play in tech a lot. A lot of my senior staff, they do the same thing, and it's wild when I'll sit with somebody who's been in engineering for 15 years. And we'll hop on a one-on-one, and the first thing they do is they open up a code editor and they'll say, "Hey, look at what I'm working on," and they'll start showing me some code, and then they'll go show me some product that they built or some project that they built. That inspires me, and that is the kind of thing that I look for. So in young talent, new talent, like somebody coming right out of college, for example, I know that they don't have a whole lot of work history, even if they've done internships, things like that. So what I'm looking for is, what are your personal projects? What are challenges that you've had where you had to know something but you didn't know it? What did you do to go teach yourself? Did you ever build something for yourself because something didn't work a certain way and you wanted it to be a certain way? What did you do to go overcome that? That is what I look for when it comes to raw talent or young talent.
And how do you, once you've hired those people, how do you design career paths for them, especially when you need to balance growth for individual contributors versus those who want to lead?
there are there are some people for whom you cannot stop them. Like when they get into your team, they immediately set themselves apart and they just start chewing up anything that you can throw at them. So for those folks, I feed them. You feed the machine and the machine runs. Obviously, for people who are running and doing a bunch of stuff, there's going to be mistakes that are made and there's going to be challenges that need to be overcome. I'm cool with that. One of the philosophies I have as a leader is failure is the greatest teacher that you have. And as long as you're failing in new ways every time, then that is a thing I can work with, right? We don't want to repeat a failure, but it's okay to fail because failure teaches us what we want to do and how we want to improve. So for those folks, I just unleash them. When they want to go do something, I find ways that to just feed the machine and let the machine take that person where they're going. I've had a couple of people in the last few years that have really excelled in this area. For people who want to lead, specifically for folks who want to get into a leadership track, I do my best to make opportunity for them. If there are projects that I know are coming up that are going to need a leader for a period of time, I'll start them on one of those, maybe a smaller project. I need two or three people and I need you to be the leader of that. I'm not asking you to manage, I'm asking you to be sort of a technical lead and a team lead and maybe even a person leader for a period of time. Let's see how you do. I've had some of my directs where I will ask them to be my number two for a period of time, like when I'm on PTO or something like that, or even have them step in with me while I'm in an engagement of some sort that needs a leadership point of view. And I'll ask them to step in and provide that. And if they need me, I'll let them come to me and I will work with them at the time so that way they can kind of cut their teeth on those experiences under the protection of somebody who's been there a little bit and under the guidance of somebody who's been there a little bit. But those are some of the ways that I move people forward and upward as best I can, as long as the opportunities are there to present themselves to them.
Let's talk a little bit about your own growth. I mean, you've been at Sugar CRM for over a decade. I wanted to know what's kept you there and how has your role evolved beyond the scope? How How do you think you've grown over this period as the company scale?
What keeps me at Sugar is what brought me to Sugar. I actually vividly remember my interview process when I came to Sugar. I actually interviewed in December of 2011, and when I interviewed with the VP of engineering at the time, she was the final stage of the interview process for me. She asked me what I wanted out of my next job, and I told her pretty clearly I wanted two things. I wanted to be able to work at scale because I hadn't worked at scale before, and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to know that the work that I set myself to was going to make a difference to somebody, not just to the business, but to people using the software, people using the creativity that my mind generated. And she looked me dead in the eyes and said, I can give you both of those. And by the time I got home, I had an offer in my inbox, which I accepted almost immediately. And I came to work, and she was right. For the last 13 years, I've been able to work at scale. I've been able to do things that I never even knew were actual things. We found limits on databases I didn't know were a thing. I found performance limits to systems and computers because of how our applications get used. But I also know that the work that I have done, both individually as a contributor, but also as a leader, still makes an impact. It still makes a difference. And that is what keeps me coming back. In terms of scaling up and outward, I say that because when I came to Sugar as an engineer. And as I moved into leadership, initially I was a leader within engineering. I think right now I would actually bill myself a product engineer. And I'm looking less at the engineering side of the business that I'm doing and more at the innovation side, more at the product side, more at the design side. And from a design angle, it's partially designing products. It's also designing process. How do we do things? How do we work, right? The ability to influence the business at a level that I'm at right now is invaluable to me making a difference. And I think that's another thing that keeps me going and also is a byproduct of where I am and where I hope to continue to go. I hope to continue to grow my influence, to extend what I'm learning beyond even an R&D angle and even into like a full business angle, right? How do you scale your business processes for growth, for financial dominance in your sector, for reaching people that might not have otherwise been reached? There's a lot of things that we can do differently or better, and I want to get into those spaces. So that's kind of how my role has evolved over time. So while I do have the engineering in my title as VP of engineering, I think my role encompasses a lot more than just the engineering side of the business.
Awesome. I wanted to change gears a little bit here, Robert, and talk about AI. I wanted to hear your take on how AI is changing the work that engineers actually do on a day-to-day basis.
There are so many different facets to AI. AI as a general topic is changing so rapidly that when you look back even 2 months ago, things that were happening 2 months ago aren't even happening anymore, right? Or they're happening differently or better. So I can tell you right now from a developer's point of view, AI is changing our landscape a lot. It's accelerating how fast we develop code. It's improving the quality of code that we develop. It's accelerating performance. It is assisting with security. It's assisting with code reviews. We're using AI now for doing things like code reviews, and some people are actually using AI for full deployments. So the impact of AI on product development, and I say that not just from the engineering angle, but with a strong focus on the engineering side. AI it's speeding up the things that we have historically taken a very long time to do. You just go use any of the products that are out there, and I'll name drop some, just the things that people have used. When you look at like Claude or Cursor or Lovable and some of the things that are out there, there's entire application foundations that are able to be built in a matter of minutes, where before, and that's by one person and some good prompting, and you have a whole application foundation. You look at what we were doing 3 or 4 years ago, we have a team of 4 engineers spending 6 months to come up with that kind of a foundation. So we're taking what historically has taken years of development, and you're compacting that down into a couple of weeks, and then refining it with your human beings that are doing that. That frees people up to go do a lot more creative type work. So the impact that AI is having, I think, is it's liberating to some degree. I know it's a little bit frightening for people because there are people who look at AI and think, hey, that's replacing me. I think if we look at it a little bit different in that it's replacing the mundane elements of the jobs that you were doing before, that frees you up to do the higher level creative work that you do. It's that I don't know that that part will ever be replaced. So if we can leverage what AI is doing to enhance our roles, that frees a lot of people up to do some really cool stuff. I think what we're going to end up seeing once we get past all the fervor that we're feeling right now of new tech is that we're going to start seeing AI being a central part of everything that we do as engineers and technologists. And the part that people play in it is going to be fantastic moving forward.
Yeah, I like to say that the people that think that AI will replace developers are the people that think the developers enjoy writing tons of lines of code for really mundane stuff, right? So, newsflash, they don't. But seriously, if you could change, let's think about engineering orgs. What's the impact of AI on engineering orgs? If you could redesign how engineering orgs work in the age of AI, what do you think you would do differently from most companies today?
So I think from an organizational perspective, I think I would look towards incorporating and embedding AI as almost as another seat in the org, if you will, right? Like right now, when we look at a typical organizational structure, you look at how organizations are strategized. We build them based on headcount and roles and responsibilities. Most engineering organizations, or at least in the Scrum model, you'll have like a team lead or a team manager or a Scrum master. You'll have 4 or 5 engineers. You'll have a development engineers. You'll have a QA engineer. You might have a UI UX engineer. From the engineering side of the house. If you were able to take an AI agent and put that agent into the team as another seat in the team, maybe they become your augmented UX person or your augmented UI person, or maybe they become your augmented coder. And I say coder, not engineer, because I believe the engineers are they're solving the problems that need to be solved, whereas coders are using code as a tool in the toolbox to do a thing. But if you can structure an organization in which you had an AI agent that did some of that work that human beings have been bogged down in for a long time, and free up the people to do the work that they are best at doing, you could scale your teams like massively in terms of output and productivity, but without scaling them as wide or as deep as we might normally need to do to get that same level of output just 2 or 3 years ago.
Great take. And by the way, you hold a patent, right? You hold a patent in adaptive component-based architecture. What future trends in software design or systems architecture are you personally betting on?
What I'm looking at right now, here's my thought on where AI is going to come into play for people in general. We do a lot of things every day that we really shouldn't have to do as human beings living in a technological space that we have, right? I hear myself daily. I'll be using an application, I'll be on a website, I'll even be out like in a store, and I'll experience something and I'll realize, you know what? Technology has come farther than this, right? For example, I was at Costco the other day, and my Costco doesn't get too crazy busy, but I happened to be there on a Sunday afternoon, and everybody that didn't leave town for the weekend decided they were going to go hang out at Costco while I was trying to shop. And I'm looking at all of the people that are there and all of the things that are in their cart and all of the lines that are forming and all of the ways that a checker is beeping things through a checkout line. And all I could think about was there are tools that do this kind of stuff. Like I could walk through the store right now with a shopping cart, and as I put things in my shopping cart, the shopping cart could know that I have done these things, and it could know who I am because I had to scan my way to get in the store. I should reasonably be able to walk in the store, have technology already identify me without having to pull out a card or a phone. I should be able to walk through the store, put things in my shopping cart, walk out of the store, and have the entirety of technology say, you know what, we know it was you, Robert. We know what you bought. We know it's going to cost this much. We have your card on file. We'll go ahead and charge you as you're walking out the door, and not have to deal with any of that crap. Yet we're still doing that, right? So what I'm betting on in the way of technology and AI in particular is making our lives even easier and more convenient than it is right now without being bogged down by all the interactions we have to have with technology. We have a lot of interactions with technology that we really don't have to have.
That's a really good point of view. Robert, I think you've once posted about working 12 hours straight before opening your front door. I love that. What boundaries or habits that you've adopted have helped you stay, grounded as a tech leader and a human being?
So yeah, recently I realized I'd been working all day, and I had left my desk, and I went outside to go see what was happening outside, and I realized I've been at it for 12 hours straight. I don't recommend that for anybody. I do recommend, if you can, take a break, get away from whatever it is you're doing, even if it's for 2 or 3 minutes here or there. I think one of the things that I tend to lean on quite a bit is my environment, my surroundings at home. I work from home. I'm full remote right now, and I have my wife at home. I have a house full of pets, and I have a couple of adult children that live with me. And so one of the things that helps keep me grounded is having people that remind me, hey, you've been at it for a minute. Like, why don't we go for a walk, right? Even my wife grabbed my hand and said, babe, let's go for a walk real quick. We'll go around the corner. That helps. Or, one of my adult daughters saying, Dad, let's go grab a cup of coffee at the coffee shop instead of making it downstairs. That usually happens here, and it gives me an opportunity to break away and not get so laser focused on what I'm doing that I forget that there's life happening around me. That does happen from time to time, and anybody who's in leadership knows that sometimes the needs of the business have to come before your own for a period of time. I don't complain about it. I'm not complaining now. But one of the things that I think is important is having someone around you that can help you get distracted when you need a distraction. And for me, I happen to have my wife nearby, who for the most part works from home as well, and she helps keep me centered when I might otherwise lose my way.
Right. Is there any advice you would give your younger self, or I mean, a younger engineer that is aspiring to become a VP of engineering or a CTO one day?
Yeah, 100%. So there's two snippets that I would say. First is take the chance. Whatever the chance is that you're faced with, take that chance. If you're looking at something and it looks like it might be a little bit risky, maybe there's a potential failure involved, you're not totally sure, take that chance. One of the things that helped put me where I am, particularly as fast as I am, is I took a lot of chances. There were opportunities that presented themselves that other people might have looked at and been like, no way. And I was sitting there with open arms saying, bring it on. I want to try it. Let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? The other is don't doubt yourself. There's a lot of people who will doubt you for you. You don't need to be one of those. Have confidence in yourself and know that you can get it done. Even if you don't see the horizon, even if you don't see the end of it, you're the master of your own destiny, and you have every ability under the sun to make positive outcomes for yourself. Don't doubt that you can do it. Every one of us at some point has done something amazing in our lives up to the point that we are at today. And I think anybody who might be watching this, anybody who might be listening to this would know they've done something that has gotten them over the hurdle of something in the past. Believe in that. You have the ability to do amazing things.
Awesome. And on to our last question. What's a contrarian belief that you have, a belief that you hold about engineering leadership and that you think goes against the grain of conventional wisdom?
This particular belief of mine, I think, is it might be at odds with potentially like C-level type leadership, and that is that I believe that people are still our most valuable asset, even in a growing, widening technology ecosystem. I'm a huge proponent of keeping the human in the human resource, and as we look at tech, as we look at what tech can do, as we look at conveniences that technology is bringing to us that might have otherwise been something that was either owned or handled by a person, or as we are building out strategies for our businesses, because that's a thing that leaders do all the time, right? We're constantly strategizing what's our next move, where are we going. I believe it is critical that we look at everything that we do through the lens of humanity. What is the impact that this is going to have on people? And that is our people internal, that is our partners, that is our stakeholders, perhaps our shareholders, and our user base. It is all people. Obviously, we need to do what is best for the business, but we also need to try to keep in mind that there are things that we can do that will positively impact people. So one area that I tend to lean on maybe a little bit more than I should is that as leaders, we can advocate for our people. We can advocate for our teams, our staff, the folks that are doing work. Even when as a leader, as an executive, we have to have the business in mind. So I don't know if I'd say it's fully contrarian, but I think it's a little bit different than some people tend to think.
I love it. Robert, thanks so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your story. I was inspired to hear you talk about how you think about management, but also seeing how you lead with heart. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you want some more Tech Teams Today content with Robert here, make sure you tune into his panel at the Tech Teams Today Live in San Francisco, T3 Live, that we held last month. Link in the show notes. For everyone listening, if you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Tech Teams Today on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And one more thing, we just launched an exclusive community for engineering leaders called the Tech Teams Today Exchange, the T3 Exchange. It's free. No noise, no sales, no pitches, no marketing. Just a space for engineering leaders to connect with each other. We've got more episodes with incredible engineering leaders coming your way. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.